instructions. So again, good morning. I'm Reva with Quality Sewing and Vacuum, and we are here today to do our sew along to benefit children in need. And we're going to be making this really fun backpack. It's a drawstring backpack, really simple. And I think you're going to really enjoy our time together. So before we get going, I am going to give a couple of little housekeeping items. And first of all, when you all came in, you will find that you are muted. You'll be able to tell that because to the bottom left of your picture, there should be a little microphone that's red with a line through it. The reason for that is that a small sound on your side ends up magnifying throughout everyone else's computer. And also when a sound comes from one location, they take control of the screen. So instead of seeing the demo, they'll be seeing your lovely face. So that is just another reason why we have it muted. So in the bottom left-hand corner, if you're on there's two different ways to view this. If you're on a PC or on a computer, you're gonna see your controls at the bottom of the screen. If you're on an iPad, it's probably gonna be up at the top. So you have a couple of things down in the bottom left-hand corner. The first one is mute. And then, and just so you know, if some background noise starts coming through, I'm going to go and mute everybody. It'll just be a one-click, so it'll be easy to do. But then you're going to get a message on your screen that you've been muted. That doesn't mean you need to go try to unmute yourself. It's just an informational item. Then to the right of that, there is a little movie camera. And if you have that nice and white with no red line through it, then that means that your camera is on so we can see what you're doing and interact with you, which is really lovely. I love classes and I miss the in-person classes. So seeing your lovely smiling faces is going to be very helpful. Then if you take a look toward the middle of the, you'll see a chat bubble. And this is a great way for you to pop in questions should you have them. Now we have a very large group that's joining us today, and I'm going to try to keep up with the chat, but that can be a little bit of a challenge to be able to keep up with anything. So if I happen to miss a question, please unmute yourself and say, hey, Reva, and then ask your question and then remute yourself as soon as you're done with that. Okay. Then also, if you are seeing me as a big screen, you already have it on speaker view. If you're seeing just a tile like a Brady Bunch vision of everybody that's in the class, or as much as a page will hold, then if you go up to the upper right-hand corner and on an iPad, it might be in the upper left-hand corner, you're going to see a little box and it says view. So if you click on that, you can choose speaker view is going to show you the large screen, and gallery is going to be the small individual ones. Okay, so that is going to be the main thing. So okay, so everyone should be able to see me right now. I have a device that is set on to see what you guys are seeing. So hopefully that is. And remember, if you are wanting to re-watch this, that is perfectly fine because we will be recording it. And I know some people may have different things that you need to do today, and you might not be able to stay for the entire time, but just know that it will be recorded. Now, the recordings do take some time to process, so it may not be instantaneous that the recording gets to you, but we will email that out as soon as it is done. I've had recordings be done right away, and then I've also had recordings that took 36 hours to render. So we don't have any control over that. We can just all send good vibes and happy thoughts that way. Okay, so our project today is spearheaded and encouraged by our friends at Baby Lock. And so they've come up with this project and they've encouraged us all to create these and donate them to help children and youth in need. And we are partnering with Mary's Place, which is a local Seattle-based charity that helps women and children have a safe, warm place to sleep, and also to help get training so the mother can get gainful employment. So that is just such a wonderful thing. Therefore, you know, when the moms are more capable of having a circumstance that they can thrive in, also the children as well. So we're going to be doing that. Now you can drop off backpacks at any one of our locations. And if you're out of state, you can mail them. And in the email that comes after this class that has the link will also again include the mailing address should you want to do that. So we're just really excited that you're all here. Okay, so are you ready to start? Did you all do your homework? I know. Sometimes we don't do our homework, and that's okay. So, but we have anyway, I can't remember. Okay, see, you keep cutting. Oh, I just missed that. I know you indicated one. Yes, there's a question. It says woven fabrics. Does that include having flannel? Flannel does count. And someone asked to have everyone muted, and everyone is muted. I'm the only one who is not muted. So we are good. Okay, and then let's see if there's any more questions before we get going. Okay, so we are going to go over some cutting ideas. Oh, okay, and that's good. So yes, Stephanie, we are going to go over some cutting ideas and do that. And oh, we have some people that are ready. And yes, so Julie said she thought this was a serger class, and then it did switch, and that is because we thought it was a completely serger class because that's what it was, serger month, and that's what we were. But it does include some sewing, but we are going to be doing serging. We're going to be doing sewing. So we're going to be doing both, because I know a lot of you out there have sergers and you want to use those. Or maybe you have one, you're going to be using your sewing machine, but you want to know what on earth you're going to be doing or how to do something on your serger. And I'm sure you saw in the email, the one thing that is unfortunate, being that we're not in a group together live, is that there's really no way for us to facilitate giving everyone one-on-one machine usage classes. Okay, is everyone, I'm going to pick on, I see Tammy. Tammy, yeah, I see, yeah. Okay, so Stephanie said that my sound is cutting out and the video is freezing. Is that the same for you? You have to nod or what, or do something. It does? Yeah, Ellen says no. Tammy, you got to either nod or shake. It does for you. Does anybody else have that problem? Karen, no? And okay. Okay, San Bob, you need to unmute yourself for a second. What is your actual name? Because I'm pretty sure San Bob is not it.
It's Sandy.
Oh, you know what? I have my mute on.
No. My name is Sandy.
Okay, good. I'll try to remember that. All right. All right, thank you. All right, so it looks like some people are, just know that if your connection is lagging and you're getting a little bit of breaking up, the recording should be perfectly fine. So you can go back there. And if it happens to cut out on you when there's something that you felt was important, like when I'm talking about my dog, I know that's important. But if I say something and you miss it, please just let me know. And you can, find that mute button and just let me know. Just please remember to remute yourself after that. Okay. So, All right. Oh, and Julie says, Julie's going to be our resident tech person, I suppose. Julie says if you're having challenges with your connection, if you turn off your video feed, if your camera's not on, then that might help as well. Okay. All right. So we'll go with that. Okay. So let's talk about our little project here. And I'm going to switch cameras over to, let's see how well I can do this. It will probably take me a second to get my mojo going, right? So let's go over here and take a look at, come on, there we go. Take a look at my cutting area. This is not my real cutting area. You can see it's really small. And now I'm going to have to kind of turn my back on you. So in the little tiny pictures, you probably see my face now, but it's over there. So I'm not trying to be rude. Okay. All right. So, and that also means that I can see the chat. So make sure if you have a question that you let me know that. Okay. All right. So, oh, I had asked you to cut out, and I also asked you to print your instructions. So I don't print my instructions. My instructions are right here on my iPad, which of course you can do with your instructions as well, since they're a PDF. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the cutting instructions. There's two different cutting instructions that they give us. They have a listing for a child size bag, and they have a listing for a teen size bag. The child size bag, which you can't really see on my picture here, so you're probably going to be able to see it on your paper. It's the second page of the instructions. So the child size bag is 13 by 16 rectangles. So two 13 by 16 rectangles. And the teen size is two 16 by 19 inch rectangles. Okay, so let's talk about that just for a moment. I did mine. This is the teen size bag, and it's a nice size bag, but I can see that it might be a little bit big for a child. So the child size fabric is smaller. So this is, here it is. This is the child size one. This is the one that's 13 by 16. Okay. And then the teen sized ones are 16 by 19. Now, if you're doing the teen size one, what I did is I cut this, the width of the length of the fabric. Okay, so I had a yard of fabric, and if you get a half a yard of fabric, that's 18 inches, right? So if you had a piece of fabric that was 19 inches, or you could just do 18 inches, that's a half a yard, you'd just be a little bit smaller. And then cut your fabric the 18 inches. So this would be my selvage right along my long side here. And then cut the full width of fabric. So I had 19 inches from selvage to selvage. And then I cut and I had it folded, trimmed off my selvage, and then cut a piece that was 16 inches. And then I had the little bit left over. Okay. And then what that gave me were my pocket pieces. Okay. So if you cut your strip, and you can backpack without having the pocket added, but it's easy to add. So I've got my 19 inches by 16 inches. Okay. And that gives me the ability to actually make two bags, a bag out of my contrast fabric, which was my pocket, and a bag out of my main body fabric. So I cut both of them, the pocket piece and the fabric piece, at 19 inches with the width of fabric, and then at 16 inches. With the extra, I was able to cut out a couple of pieces for the pocket. So I had one in the contrast fabric of this and one in this fabric. And these pocket pieces for the teen size are 12 by 16. Okay. And then I just had to find a couple of extra little scraps of that size for the back, for the inside of the pocket. That lets you use up that whole piece. And it is very fat quarter friendly, and it's also a great stash buster. Then if you have fabric that isn't your favorite anymore, it might be somebody else's favorite. So it's a good way to use up a half a yard at a time of 2 different fabrics, and you make 2 bags. But that would require, if you're going to do 2 bags out of that half yard of fabric, remember you're going to need a little bit extra so you can do a lining on your pocket. Okay, are there any questions on the cutting out? Okay, I'll give you a second. I know it takes a minute to toggle to your mute. Okay, so hopefully that helped a little bit, but I don't have a lot of space here to get all the cameras, and so I could have nice up close pictures for you. I'm in a very tight space, so we're cozy today. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the prep of the fabric and how to get it all ready, and how to do different seam finishes. We're going to do it on the sewing machine. We're also going to do it on the serger, and we're also going to bind. And we're going to talk about binding on the sewing machine and binding on the serger. So we have many different things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to do start with basic, and I'm going to show you first on a sewing machine, and then I'm going to show you on the serger. Okay, so if you have your pieces ready, if you take your 2 of your main fabric pieces, so the 16 by 19, or if you're doing the child size, it would be 13 by 16. Now this rectangle is going to be, the skinny way is the left and right, and the height is the long ways. Okay. And Sue, if you and anybody else who didn't see the written instructions, those were emailed to you over the last couple of days, and I don't know when you signed up. So maybe you, if you signed up late, then you may not have seen that. But it also will be included in the email with the link to rewatch the video. Okay, along with the link that has the notions that we're going to be using today. Okay, all right. So along this, mine is the teen size, so I'm working with the 16" by 19. So the top of mine, I'm going to take one right now. What we're going to do, and I'm going to rotate it so you can see hopefully the whole thing. This is my 16". My top, and I'm now going to be moving to page 2. Okay, and this is where we're going to talk about the casing for the top of the bag. Okay, so on page 2, it wants us to come down 2.5 inches and make a mark. Okay, and I use my ruler. Of course, if you have it on a cutting mat, you can also use the lines on your mat. But come down the 2.5 inches and use a fabric marker. Now, you may know the difference between a blue marker and a purple marker. A blue marker is washout. It will stay the entire time until you wash it out. One that's purple is air erasable. So it will not stay for a terribly long time. So don't mark a quilt or a garment and then leave it sit for a week and then come back, because your marks will probably be gone. But this is the Quilter Select pen. It's a newer one, and it also has an eraser on the end so you can get rid of the mark should you make an error or you want it gone sooner. So I'm going to go ahead and make a mark at my 2.5 inch down from the top. Now, it also wants us to make this mark 1/2 inch in length. So I'm going to bring my ruler down and align that up with my mark, and then go to my 1/2 inch mark and just draw my line. Okay, see, can I get that up to you? Can you see my line? That's a 1/2 inch line. And you want to repeat that on the opposite side. Okay, so I'm going to come down 2.5 inches and then align my 1/2 inch mark with that. And you want to do that on the top of both of your pieces. So on the front and on the back. So now I have my opposite side. And if you, after you get one done and you decide you want to do lots of these, you could do this step for all 4 that you're making, or, you know, if you're making 3 or 10 or whatever you're making, if you do things in an assembly line, it will go very quickly for you. Okay, so there is my mark. Now, you can also use friction pens. Not everyone likes friction pens. I love friction pens, so I'm happy to use those. Now, what we're going to do on this line is we're going to cut in on that line that exact 1/2 inch. So we have a 1/2 inch slit in both sides. Okay, so I'm going to cut that and I'm going to do my other piece. Okay, as I'm doing this, how many of you are sewing along, or are you sewing along with me, or are you going to go back and sew later? Let me know what you're doing there so I can make sure. So Julie's going back later. Who else is anyone? Oh, there's several sewing along. Okay, so I'm going to try to take this at a little bit of a pace. And so let me finish and show you. Oh, great. There's a lot of people sewing along. Let me show you what to do with this piece. And then I'm going to, we'll take a minute for you to go and press. So once you have your little sections cut, you're going to press them. And I'm going to use my, my hot ruler. This is a hot ruler and this is a hot hammer. So you notice the hammer has a curve. So if you're doing pockets or if you're doing a deep hem, these are very thin and very lightweight. They're made of a fibrous material, but they don't conduct heat, so they don't get hot. Unlike the old thing we used to use that was made of metal that you could burn just by looking at it, right? So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to line this up so I have my consistent seam there, and you're going to fold over that 1/2 inch and press it. Okay, and once you have the one pressed, see I've got that 1/2 inch pressed, I'm going to fold under the raw edge to meet that fold that I just pressed, and then repress the whole thing. That way you have a nice little hem right there, a little rolled hem. So no raw edges are visible. Okay, see, so I pressed it first, the 1/2 inch, then folded under, and we've got our nice piece there. So I'm going to let you go and do yours and get all 4 of those top edges pressed under with a little rolled hem. So you end up with a little 1/4 inch, seam there. And just to read, because I saw a question there, what is a hot hammer? The hot hammer is this little item from Clover. And, oh, I'm sorry, this is the hot ruler. And it's 2.5 inches wide by not 10 inches. Okay, so it's, and they're flexible. They kind of feel like a really hard compressed felt, but I don't think that's what it is. It's something magic. I don't know what it is. But the neat thing is that it's imprinted with the measurements. So here it has a 1/4 inch, a 1/2, 3/4, and an inch that are labeled, but you have a mark every 1/8 of an inch on here. So you can do a hem, or if you're working on a self-binding, you know when you turn it up that it's even. A hot hammer is wider you can see this is 3 inches this direction, and it is 1, 2, 3, 4 inches this way. So it gives you more surface when you're doing a garment hem to be able to measure. And then it also has a curved edge. So if you're doing a patch pocket or something like that, that you can get that turned in a nice way. So it's just a nice tool to have when you're doing any type of pressing, because then you can leave the measurement there and have that for reference, but it doesn't get hot, so you don't have to worry about burning yourself with that. Now, if it helps, you can always just turn under your 1/4 inch while you have it right on with the hot hammer still there if you choose to. So I'll go ahead and give that a press. Okay, now one thing you will notice is that this guy, well, now he's kind of fluffy too because I was playing with him. Give yourself a final press without the hot hammer under it, so it will lay nice and crisp and be flat. All right, so I have 2 more to do, and I hope that you guys are right there with me, because I'm going to show you in just a moment our next step. It's a beautiful day today. I am surprised that we have so many together in this class with how lovely it is outside. It's supposed to be in the mid-70s today in Washington. I don't know where you're all from. All right. Tammy, thank you for helping out Linda. Okay. I should say happy Cinco de Mayo. But I'm sorry, I don't have margaritas for everybody. You're gonna have to get your own. So, all right. All right, I'm going to turn under this one, and then we're going to go back and okay, so now we should be back to normal. Let me bring this over here so I can see what you're seeing. Okay, now, Miss Gail, I'm going to pick on you for a moment because oh, there you go. There you moved. Okay, I was just wondering because you've been so still, and I thought, is she totally frozen? But you're just this calm person. That's awesome. I'm not a calm person. Okay, I try to be. Okay, so now we're gonna go on, let's see. Tammy said, I had this part done, then I got stuck. I am not a good pattern reading. Yeah, that's why pictures are the best. I don't know why there's any words on a pattern, because you have to do a pattern by the words, right? Or by the pictures. Words are for the last resort. And Ellen, there will be the recording, but I can't give you any access information at this time. You need to wait for the recording to finish and render, and then we will be able to send you a link so you can review the video. Okay, so okay. It will just take it, and sometimes you may have gotten in a little bit late, which I think, oh, and I'm sorry, I didn't just realize now that you direct messaged me, so I'm not trying to put you out there.
No, it's okay.
But just so you know, I've had videos take a couple of hours to render, and I've had them take 36 hours to render. So I can't even give you an exact approximation of how long it's going to take. Okay. So just know that it's coming. It'll be coming. Okay, so let's go over to the sewing machine. Now, I know the world isn't perfect because we are not here together, but I've done the best I could to try to get really good close-up shots for you so you can see what we're working on today. So so that would be, at least that was my intention, right? Okay, so we're going to, oh, I dropped it. Okay, so we're going to stitch down are the piece right here, this piece right here. And it's going to end up being the sides of the casing. And if you've never worked with a casing, the casing is what is going to hold the drawstring part of the bag. So I chose personally to reinforce the top and the bottom of this just for safety's sake. Now, if you're on a baby lock or a brother machine, the machine normally defaults in a far left position. Of course, in the settings, you can change that. I personally like a center needle position because that's how I learned. And for if no other reason, that's why. So you can choose to change that. So if you're on a baby lock or a brother machine, my machine here has defaulted to 1-01, which is a far left position. And I'll tell you why it's in a far left position in a minute. And then the center needle position is 103. Okay. Okay, let's see. I am sewing a sewing machine geek. Okay, I love that, Sandy, that you're a sewing machine geek. Everyone can put in which machine that you're sewing on. That's kind of fun. I know that a lot of us have various brands. So whether you have a Baby Lock, a Solaris, a Luminaire, or if you have a small machine that's sewing only, this big portion right here is the embroidery unit. So that's why it's so big right here. I have the arm of the embroidery unit right over there. You don't have to take that off, which is kind of nice. Okay, so the reason why I'm going to put it back onto the left needle position. The reason why the machine defaults in the left needle position is because the engineers are really smart. I grew up on a machine that is a center needle position. Oh, Carol, you have a 7570. Good job. That was my second FOF. I started on a 7550, which didn't have embroidery, and the 7570 was the first one with embroidery that we had. Anyway, so good machines. All the machines are good. I see people with Janome, Bernina, and a Luminaire, and all sorts of different machines. So this is going to be fun. Okay, so the reason though why it's in the left needle position is because, I don't know, with all my trials of trying to make sure that you could see everything. Okay, the left needle position puts the needle in that far left portion of the needle hole, okay? And what that does for us is that there's more stability here on that left-hand side because there's the wall of the needle plate, right? That's the far left side of that needle plate. Okay. Now I see someone is on a featherweight. Now the featherweight from 1941, if I am correct, that's a single needle hold only. Ellen, did you have a question? Or are you dancing?
I'm just going, that's me. That's me.
Oh, that's you. Okay. All right. But you probably have center needle position in that because that was the primary function of that machine, was just to sew, right? It was to give a beautiful straight stitch and to do the work. Now, when we are, Carolyn, I'm going to get to your question too, because that's an awesome question. So when you're working with doing a straight stitch and you're on a modern machine that can do a zigzag, oh, that's pretty, Ellen. Thank you for sharing that. So and a modern machine could be anything after 1950 or whatever when it did a zigzag, right? And Sandy, if you want to try your featherweight from 1950, go for it. I have a treadle that was my grandmother's, but I can only make it go backwards. So I'm a lousy one to tell you how to run the old. anyhow, when the zigzag came into play, then that gave us in fact, let me do this. Maybe this will be more helpful. What if I did this? Look at that. Okay, so there's my needle hole. So when the zigzag came into play, it removed some stability from your stitching, right? When doing a straight stitch, because now this is like after Thanksgiving dinner and you've loosened your pants. Now you've got some room to breathe. Okay, so your straight stitch might not be as straight because it can wobble. So if you use your needle all the way over in the far left-hand position, it's being supported on 3 sides. So therefore it's more stability, it has more stability. And yes, if you have a straight stitch needle plate, then you would have stability all the way around it. And that's helpful. But remember not to, you're on a machine that's probably 8 or 10 years old, your machine may not remind you that you have a straight stitch needle plate on. And if you go to a zigzag, then you're going to break a needle. And that's just sad, right? That's just a sad day. Okay, so now let's talk about other machines, because I saw someone has like the FOF Icon. The FOF Icon has a straight stitch bobbin case that is used in conjunction with your far left needle position to give you an extremely straight stitch. Another thing to think of is, I don't remember, my brain died. Okay, so anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it in the left-hand needle position. Oh, that's what it was. If you have a straight stitch needle plate and you are doing tiny things like quilting and things like that, then remember that if you use a straight stitch needle plate, your fabric is less likely to go for a journey down into the feed dog system and the machine eat it. Okay, all right. So with my needle being in the far left-hand position, I'm going to position my fabric so it's easy for me to see. So maybe I'll choose to stitch this direction and just use a straight stitch and line up the edge of my foot. Oops, sorry, you couldn't see the edge of my foot with the outer fold of that fabric. And then I'm going to get a really nice top stitch. So I know that we're used to having the bulk of the fabric to the left, but it's okay to switch that over. The other thing I could do if I want to is I could come into my machine and flip it over. Now my needle's all the way on the right-hand side. So that will make it handy for right here. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch, and by gum, if I didn't forget to plug in my, I didn't plug in my foot control. Doggone it. I'm not a sewing with a button person, but that's okay. So I'm going to start sewing forward, and then I'm going to go backwards till I get, and then I'm going to sew forward again. And then when I get down to the end of the fabric here, back up and cut the thread. And so that way it will nice. It's going to just reinforce that. So do that for all four of your pieces. And yeah, some of those older machines, I see Sally says she has an older machine, and some of those machines are hard to get parts for, and that's a bummer. But if that's the case, you know, you might come test sew some other machines, kind of like when you go test drive a new car and see if anything strikes your fancy, because there might be something that the convenience is just a huge difference in how they perform, make it so much more a joy of sewing. There's a couple of things, I don't know what your guys's hot buttons are, so put in the chat what features are your favorite on your machine, because I know some of you are just watching us sew right now, so this gives you something to do. My things that I could not live without, and I never realized that I couldn't live without them until I had them, is needle down. And I love the pivot feature, so when I stop, the machine will automatically raise the foot so I can pivot it, and my thread cutter. Those things make life so much easier, and I absolutely love sewing with those features. They just make the sewing so much more of a what a picnic as opposed to, it's a difference between mending and sewing, right? I don't know about you, but oh yeah, the air threading on a serger is, oh, and an automatic needle threader. Yes, yes, I forgot about that one. But you know, when you have to mend, that's not fun. In fact, my husband knows not to bring me mending because I won't do it because that's not fun. I don't want to. I really will do it, but I don't like it. But sewing is a lot of fun. Okay, so we have our pieces here now all sewn, and I'm going to just trim my little hairs. Now, if you have an automatic thread cutter, you probably realize that you get a nice little, it pulls the tails to the back side when you're done. Okay, so there's my little casing ends. So they're nice and clean and they won't do any fraying at all. So I love that. So now we're gonna go over and press the top edge. So what we're going to do, and I'll give you the instruction here before we switch over to the to our other camera. So that way, if you want to get a head start before I switch, then you can. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take and turn down the casing about a 1/2 inch. Let me make sure I have the right amount there. A 1/4 inch, sorry, a 1/4 inch. No, I'm oh, it is a 1/2 inch. Okay, so turn it over like this, and we're not going to have to turn this one twice because we are going to encase that. But go ahead and press the whole length of the top, then fold it down so it meets where that notch is. So I have mine a little bit low right now. So it's going to meet up with that line and press again. So you're going to turn under a 1/2 inch, and then you're going to turn down about 1 inch or whatever it is to make that meet up right there. Now, someone had emailed earlier, couple of days ago, and asked about the size of the strapping we were going to use for straps. And so if you're using a strap that's wider, for example, let's say you had a 1 inch wide strip of strapping that you're going to use for your straps. This is 2.5 inches. We take the 1/2 inch out here, then we turn it over again, and we have a 1 inch casing, but we need to stitch that down. So you really only have 3/4 inch left over. So if you had a strapping that's 1 inch wide, and you can also use grosgrain ribbon for, which would be fun. So let's say you had 1 inch wide ribbon or whatever, you need 1 inch, 1 inch, and a 1/2 inch, right? But then you're going to need at least another 1/4 inch for that casing. So to be safe, I would probably mark down 3 inches here. It's always okay to have a smidge more room than it is for it to be too tight. So give yourself a 1/2 inch to turn under, the length of the width of your webbing, and another 1/2 inch, not 1/2 inch twice, just 1/2 inch once for your stitch line. So that would be 3 inches in the case of a 1 inch casing. This is designed for a 3/4 inch or 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. Okay, does that make sense? So I'm going to go ahead and switch over, and if it didn't, please let me know. Let's see, I've got to see what this chat is. Yes, it's okay to only turn down a 1/4 inch. If you do so, that's fine. Just remember, you just cannot, oh, it is only turned 1/4 inch. Yeah, that's fine. Just make sure you're not going to miss it. Oh, how lovely. You made your wedding gown on your machine. Okay. Okay, if you serged it at a 1/4 inch, that's fine too. Okay, so I'm going to come over here to the other side. I think on the one that I did, I did 1/2 inch just because it was easier for me to go ahead and where did my other guy go? My other picture is gone. Let me go back here. Take me a second to find it. Yes, it's gone. Oh, for Pete's sakes. All right, well, you're gonna have to trust me on the pressing part, okay? So I no longer have a pressing camera. My camera died, how rude. Okay, so I'm gonna press that under and then I'll press it again. This will give you a time to do that. Now, when you go back to sew the casing on that and stitch it, then we're gonna stitch right near that, the folded edge, especially if you only have a 1/4 inch that you've done, then that 1/4 inch is going to be very important for you to pay attention to make sure that you get your fabric caught and it be secured. Okay, because there's nothing worse than stitching it down and then having it not be stitched down. Okay. All right. All right, so is everybody getting theirs done? I'm just about done doing mine. So we should be, hopefully you're all about there as well. Okay, so now I'm going to turn back to I'll turn back on the sewing machine camera. So now I have my edge turned under here. So I'm just going to stitch right along that. And this is your casing end. So I am going to back stitch there because when we, this is going to get a lot of pressure and manipulation from pulling the handles. So I'm actually going to back stitch a couple of times because I want that reinforced very well. And then I'm just going to go and stitch along the edge here. And if you had a foot control on, you could sew faster, but I'm too scared to sew fast without a foot control. Are any of you non-foot control people? Do you sew with just the push button? I think it might depend on how long ago you learned how to sew, right? When I learned how to sew, there was no such thing as a go button. So I don't handle myself well without the button. Okay, so there's my top stitch. And then I am going to grab my other piece and stitch that down. All right. This one I gave it a really long one. So anytime you're doing a project and you know that the area is going to get a lot of wear, consider doing a couple of back tacks to that section. And then I want to show you something once I get past this. Okay, if you have a brother or baby lock machine and it's a newer one, then this is something you may not know. So if you have a Quattro or a Elissimo, those machines I believe did it too. So if I'm going to start sewing, if I push and hold, let me move the camera so you can see my button just a smidgy, I guess, right? Here's my button. So if I push and hold my go button, look at how slow it goes. Then when I let go, it goes up to full speed. Now this is really handy if you're doing machine embroidery, because sometimes you need to go slow to get around where your fabric is going to be, you're adding an applique or you're adding another piece of fabric. If you have it go slow, then you can control what it's doing and what the fabric is doing. And that can be very, very helpful for you to do. And like here, I can push my go button and hold it down so it goes slowly so it doesn't go running off the end for me before I do my back tack. So that's something else to know. Okay, so now I've got my lovely little casing done, and now it's time to sew them together. So what you're going to do is take your pieces and put them right sides together, matching up your bits and pieces, matching up the tops. And I do really like using quilt clips. I'm not sure if you know that there's a right and a wrong side to your quilt clips. You have the curved colored part, and then you have the flat part, the white clear part, and it's flat. That's designed to rest on the surface of your machine, because if it was this way, it would be distorting your fabric. And then you also have some marked lines on there that help you know where 1/4 inch is and things like that. And then the mini clips, if you happen to have the mini clips, they're very pronounced in how they are marked. So they're really make it very easy to see those marked lines. Okay. Right, so I'm just going to use a couple.
Don't we need to put the pocket on before we do the side seam?
Thank you. If you're not doing a pocket, you can keep going. But yes, thank you. Thank you. I think that was Carolyn. So yes. Okay. So yeah, thank you. Let's go over to the serger then. Or not the serger. Let's talk about the pocket. So the pocket is done the same way as what we just did. Okay, now we're going to talk about the basic pocket first, then we're going to explain finishes and edges for the pocket. So thank you for keeping me on track. Okay, so I was using up my scraps, so I have one of each of the fabrics. So my zigzag cape fabric is going to be the outside of the pocket, and then my polka dot is going to be the lining of my pocket. So just put those edges together. I am going to go to a center, just a regular center stitch for this. And then we're just going to sew along the top. Now, in our exploration that we're going to do in a little bit, we're going to have the ability to go through and explore different finishes that we can put on the edge of that pocket and different treatments that we can choose to use. So we're going to do some binding. We're going to talk about piping. We're going to talk about adding zigzag stitches, rickrack, and then also some things on your serger. So that's all lots of fun. Okay, so what we're going to do now is on this one, it's just plain. So I'm going to press it open and then press it to the back. So I have that edge there. Now, if you're doing a plain pocket like this with no piping or anything like that, you can offset your pocket for a minute. See how I'm letting that lining show a little bit there? So it almost looks like a piping, right? So that will be kind of fun. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and press that down. All right, so when we get this done, we're going to stitch our casing. Now the casing, we want to give ourselves enough space to hold our elastic. Okay, so you're going to stitch down 1/2 inch. In this case, since I made myself a faux pipe, I better stitch that down so that way it won't slip around with the elastic, right? So I really have an edge there. So I'm just stitching, I'm aiming for the ditch. You know, we'll see how well I do. I should show you, if you do have a machine that has the guideline marker, let me turn off my subsequent, off main, and that is, you probably can't see it because it is too bright in here. But I could use my laser guide or my guideline marker, and it's illuminating right along there, which makes it easier to sew right in place. Now the Luminaire, Luminaire 2, Solaris, Solaris 2, and the new Icon that is coming out this fall all will have that marker. Then the Dream Machine and the, I can't remember what Baby Lock was before. Anyway, it has a laser guide. So that's a fun machine too. Okay, so then I'm going to, since I stitched that there, I'm going to actually put the edge of my fabric on my 5/8 of an inch mark. And I am going to go ahead and stitch my seam, and I'm going to back tack because I'm going to thread in my elastic in through there. And it's okay to give yourself a little bit bigger of a casing, but not a lot bigger. So if you're using 3/8 or a 1/2 inch, if you're using 1/2 inch elastic, you better give yourself a little bit more space. I'm using a 3/8 inch elastic, and I'm going to back tack. All right. I thought I had them cut well. I guess I didn't. Anyway, okay. So now we're going to thread our elastic in. And let me get my right piece. Your elastic is 12 inches long, is the size that they ask you to have. Now, there's a couple of ways you can string your elastic. Okay, you can use a safety pin and put pin in the end of your elastic and put a safety pin in there. You can also use, where do you go? A bodkin. This little guy, this kind of bodkin is pretty fun. It does a whole multitude of different types of items. In fact, we'll use that this time. And then there's also the clover bodkin, and we'll use that one in the next one. So we'll look at both of them. So how this guy works is he has, it's like tongs, like cooking tongs, and he's got teeth on the end there. I don't know if you can see that. Little teeth, and those grip. So I'm going to slip that in there and hold that on, and then this piece slides down and it pinches to hold it firmly. But the clips having, oh yes, I'll Destiny, thank you, Alice. Yes, I'll repeat the thing about the markings. So I know it's going to be kind of hard to see on a quilt clip. You have the flat side, which I know is redundant, right? And then the curve. So the flat side is supposed to be down on the bed of your fabric, or machine. If you look inside, there's 2 sets of markings right here. So you can use that if you're trying to pin at a specific distance. And then on the top, there's kind of a, it's hard to see, I can't get it in here, but you can kind of see a spot right here where it meets, where it's about 1/4 inch. And if you look down through the colored part, you can see that marking down there that will give you your 1/4 inch. So if you want to go in 1/4 inch, if you're working with, sure, nothing else falls. If you're working with your mini clips, this one's easier to see. It has, its nose is 1/8 of an inch. And then you can see there's markings in here as well. So you can line up at 1/4 inch. Now, why on earth would you want the mini clips? The reason why is because look at how much closer you can get your machine foot to this, the small one, than you could to here. Because it even curves in a little bit to give a little bit more access, so you don't have to take them out as soon. Now, here's another thing. I don't know if did you know that your Zirkle can hold your, kind of control some of your quilt clips, which is kind of handy. Okay, minis are great for zippers. Yes, 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 they are. Okay, so now we have this guy. So now we're going to take him and stick him inside the casing and then just thread him through, thread the elastic through. And the trick you want to make sure you do is not pull out all the elastic, right? When you're getting down so it's close, like this is, I'm getting really close. I am going to stop with it hanging out a little bit. And then I'm not going to use a quilt clip. I'm actually going to pin this baby in here so he doesn't move on me because I don't want it to slip out. Okay, so now I'm going to keep going on this end and then I'll pull him out. And I'm okay if all the gathers are in the middle because this is going to need to go into the side seam and this is going to need to go into the side seam. So I'm okay for this to be flat. It'll be easier to work with. Now I can remove this and then I'm going to suck him back in just so he's extending out a little bit. Okay. Okay, and I'm just going to turn my pin around just because it was making me crazy having it go that way. Okay. Another thing, Sandy, that are great for zippers is the Quilter Select glue stick. Since we're talking about things that are great to hold down stuff, this is amazing. It is a bright neon yellow, so you can see it on light and dark fabrics. It's kind of a cleary, milky white once it dries. And it dries fairly quickly and you can needle through it or stitch through it without gumming up your needle. And yes, there will be a video on the recording of this once we're finished and it renders. You will be emailed that link when it's ready. Okay, so this will be my front piece and we'll take my pocket that I almost forgot to do. So good job. It was Carolyn, I believe, that reminded me about that. So thanks for keeping me on track. And I'm going to I have that extra because apparently I just did not cut them. I didn't make them the same size. So I'm just going to trim off my extra just so I can meet them up. Okay, so I'm going to take my pocket and put it right sides down. So my lining is to the back. I'm using the polka dot for my lining. Okay, so I'm just going to meet those up. And then up at the top here, where it meets, I'm going to go ahead and put in a quilt clip there. And then I'll put one down at the bottom as well, just to hold it in place. Because the first thing that we're going to do is actually we're going to stitch the bottom edge. Okay. So, but I'm going to get this just in place first, so it's not flopping around and all crazy. All right. Oops, he's not up high enough. Let me adjust it. And since I, when I put the casing on, remember I made that little fake piping. So then my, my bottom doesn't quite match. So just to make it cleaner for you to see, there's my, it's about 1/4 inch and my little piping was about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to cut that off. If you plan for it, you can make it that much shorter. But anyway, all right. All right. If you're trimming, yeah, if you're trimming the pocket, would you do it before the elastic? Yes, that would be the correct thing to do. And I would lay it out on your cutting mat and make sure it's flat and trim then. That would be great. The elastic for the youth size is 10 inches. Elastic for the teen size, for the child it's 10, for the teen it's 12 inches. Okay, so now we're just going to stitch across the bottom, which will get all these layers put together, and I'll slide that one clip up a little bit higher because that's what's holding the edges on. Now, I happen to know for a fact that my this darker fabric is not cut straight because I just hacked it off because I didn't use my cutting table. So I'm going to follow the edge of my foot right here on that, on the edge of my polka dot fabric. Look at me, I'm getting more brave. I'm sewing faster now. Now this I'm not back tacking at because it's going to be incorporated into the seams. Okay, so I'm not worried about that. So we're going to do one of, oops, I just lost my pin or my clip. So we're going to go ahead and stitch our pocket on, and it doesn't actually, you didn't have to put it right sides down, but it doesn't matter because my fabric is the same front and back. So actually, if it did matter to you, then you could have laid it out frontwise. I wasn't thinking too much about that. Okay, so now I'm going to back tack for a moment on the top of my pocket there. And then I'm going to also back tack again, just to make sure that that elastic is stuck in there. Because the last thing that you want to do is have your elastic pull out on you. Okay. So now you don't have to do this step. You can just simply pin this and then stitch it. But if it makes you feel more comfortable, then by all means, go ahead and give this a stitch into place just to hold it. And that's kind of what I'm doing right here. So again, I'm going to stitch and I'm going to back tack, and I'm going to back tack through all that elastic. Last time I stopped a little bit short, so that's why I had to do it twice. But this will just get that pocket anchored to your bag. Okay, so now I'm going to take those pins out. So I have them in here, I don't need them. And now we're going to do one of these seams with the sewing machine, and we're going to do the other on the serger. Okay, now when you're stitching your bag together, you're going to need to pay attention to that this is laying flat because your pocket wants to pull it in. Because remember, our bag in the youth size is 16 inches wide and our elastic is only 12 inches. So it wants to pull this in. So just ignore and bunch up all the sides you're not sewing so that way this can relax. And then let's take our backpack and now we can clip them together, right? So I just got ahead of myself a little bit. Okay, now when we're sewing this, and let me see what page we're on. We are now at step 5, which is actually page 5. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna clip at my elastic and then I'm gonna come down to the bottom and clip again down at the bottom. Now, as we're sewing this, I'm gonna come down here, but I am not going to stitch all, I'm gonna leave a hole in the bottom. And this is not to turn it right side out, it's for us to be able to insert our straps into. Okay, so I'm gonna leave a hole down there. So, and I think the instructions actually show you to sew the bottom first, but it really doesn't matter as long as you make sure everything is controlled. So now I am starting, let me show you. I am gonna start sewing. This is where it gets really kind of important. I'm gonna sew right there at the edge of my folded piece because this is all raw and we don't want to start sewing over here because then you'll have all the rawness showing and it will be, could be problematic. So we're gonna come right up in here. You could even, if you're more comfortable, start sewing underneath that stitch line. So not up here above the stitch line, but under, and you could even sew through that and that would totally encapsulate that. And that's okay too. So, and I actually am gonna need to move my clip over because I can't get my foot there. So I'm going to put my foot down and I'm going to start sewing and then I'm going to reverse and back tack and then start sewing. Okay, now, can you see how this is trying to pull in from that elastic? So let me get that straightened out and make sure all my layers are smooth and then we'll keep sewing. Now, when I started sewing this seam, I went for the inside of that that stitch line. So I know that I don't have any raw edges. At your elastic, you're going to have to manipulate your fingers and to make sure it's flat. And then I'm going to give it a back tack at that elastic just to make sure that that pocket doesn't pull out. Because who knows what will get stuffed in a pocket. Okay, so now we're going to stitch this down. And I'm going to stop because I need to leave a hole. And I'm going to have seam allowance there too. So I'm going to back tack and then cut my thread. Now, for a traditional seam, you could come and trim this down so it's not as wide if you like. But I'm going to choose a zigzag stitch. And I'm going to make mine a little bit wider. This is a 3.5 wide, but I'm going to make mine a little bit wider. And the goal of a zigzag stitch for finishing the edge is to zig and to zig and then to zag off. So it encapsulates that raw edge. So can't do it. I'm just, you know, things drive you crazy when you know you're supposed to, right? So I'm going to trim my seam allowance down so it's clean and nice. And then I'll have that zigzag edge. So this is a way to control the fabric so it doesn't fray on the inside and you have a cleaner finish. And the other side we're going to do with the serger, which is the best way to really treat your fabric. But if you don't have a serger or you don't have a machine that has a stitch that's designed to do this, which there are stitches on this machine that are designed to encapsulate the edges, but a zigzag works, and that will control any of the hairs, okay? And if you don't, Terry, if you don't have the pattern was attached to the last couple emails that you've received. So depending on when you signed up for the class, so Saturday and Monday, the emails that went out then, it was attached to those. If you don't have it, it's okay because we are going to send it out again when we go to give you the link for the class. We are going to give you that handout again, so you'll have the instructions, okay? All right, so now we're gonna go over to our serger. And the serger, and I'm gonna do the bottom on the serger as well. So we have, sorry, I didn't mean to bump you there. So we've got our edge all sewn here, but we're go ahead and serge our bottom edge, and I'm going to do that first. And we're going to serge this. Now a serger can be in two different basic configurations. This is the Triumph. So it is a overlock and a cover hem machine, which means that it can do a 5-thread stitch, which is what I have it set up for now. Okay, it's very fast and it gives a nice professional edge finish. So you have the, you've got your encapsulated edges here, but then you also have a safety chain stitch, which for wovens is great. Because it gives you a really strong stitch. You know, it's a strong stitch. That's what you're going to find inside your jeans, right? Okay, so I'm going to, now we're going to come and stitch across our other side. So I'm going to come in and get a couple of more clips. A serger is something that you do not want to get anywhere near a pin because a serger cuts off the extra fabric and it will be it could cut the pin. Carolyn, I'll show you in a minute. Well, actually, let me tell you, if you're on a baby lock or a brother, you're gonna find those stitches like 1-7 through 1-29. Okay, they're going to look like crazy straight zigzag stitches that have like, they might be diagonal, they may have a honeycomb pattern, and things like that. And some of them may even look a lot like that on your illustration, okay? Found them good. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, because this wants to pull in, right? It wants to pull in so badly, I am going to use a pin, but I am going to come way over here, okay? And I'm going, and it's nowhere near where I'm going to sew. So then you can come down and repeat that process down at the other end. Okay. And get a pin in down here. And you don't need a lot of pins. So if you don't want to, you don't have to, but at that, at the elastic, it's really not a bad idea to help keep that flat, right? Okay, so now here's the fun part with your serger, is getting around the camera. Okay, no, so in here, remember, we want the needle to sew right there. We don't want the needle over here. We want it to just kiss that really nicely. So I'm gonna raise my foot up, and this is the needle, the far left needle is the one that I want to have right there in that little square corner. So I'm gonna slip this in.
Eva,
Yes,
do you want to wait till you get your straps in before you serge the side?
no, ma'am.
Okay.
I don't know who's talking, so sorry, I can't say hi, Susie.
Yeah.
We're gonna do that in a minute, because remember, we're gonna leave this open down here to put the straps in.
But I would put the strap in and then serge it down.
Okay, you can do that if you want to, but we're going by the way the instructions are.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but you could do that. It might be a matter of holding your tongue right.
Okay.
Okay, so another reason why they have you do it last is because that's an awful lot of straps, because the straps have to run through here. So you have an awful lot of material that you need to deal with. And so if you do that at the before you sew this part right here, it could be a little difficult to make sure that you're not running over them at this point. So we are going to leave that open. And if you want to do it that way, of course, by all means, do whatever works for you. Now, when you're working with a serger, leave yourself a good amount of a tail when you start. Okay, and so now we're trimming off over here on this side, but I've got a good seam going. And I'm going to show you when we get down to the part we're going to leave open. I'm going to show you how to deal with that, how to get off and leave it. Okay, so I want to leave this about this much open. So when I get to about here, I'm going to turn and go 90 degrees off. Okay. All right. And then I gave myself a long tail because I have a thread cutter on here that will cut my thread. Okay, so now we have a tail down here on this end that we're going to be able to utilize, and then we have a tail up at the top. So let's talk about tail control real quick. This will be really helpful. I'm going to get rid of those pins, and I'm going to get rid of my clip. And just in case I need it, turn my iron back on. I love irons, and I'm so glad that they're safe, but I really go crazy with the auto shut off stuff. Okay, so there's a couple of things that you can do for serger tails. If you have a chain stitch, it's just this one, the safety stitch, and your overlock, you can tie them in a knot, right? An overhand knot, just like a regular square knot. And then you can treat that with fray block. Okay, now I personally like fray block more than fray check, because fray check tends to get hard and kind of crusty and turns yellow. This stuff doesn't. Now, I will tell you though, when you open this up, poke a pin in it, don't cut off the tip, because this is very liquid in here and it will flow all over the place. Okay, so those are ways that you can deal with serger tails. But my favorite is by dropping the tool on the floor. Okay, there it is. Okay, my favorite is using the double-eyed needles. So what these are, they're not really a needle per se, but they're about 4 inches long and they have a really big eye and a blunt tip on them. So that way you can thread your threads into that eye and pull them through. So I folded it over to make, this is a fold right there. That way I don't have any real ends, and then shove it through. And there's now I've got them onto there, and I'm going to undo it because I made them too short. So let me feed my double-eyed needle first through the stitches, then I'll rethread it. You know, isn't that the way it goes? So again, I'm going to fold it in half. So I have just loops, and it won't work this time because, you know, that's the way it goes. And just wiggle and push that through. And now I have that, and I can have this come out this end, and it sucks those threads on through. And then you can trim off the extra. So it's very clean, but they won't, but they'll stay there, right? And you can always give it a little touch of the fray block at the top so it doesn't disappear. Okay, so that's how you would take care of that. I'm not going to necessarily worry about my end down here because we're going to go back and stitch that. Another thing that I would probably do with these tops is, because, you know, getting in and out of a bag, especially if it's a teenager or a child, it's going to take a lot of abuse. So if you put your seam allowance to one side and then stitch back and forth from one side to another underneath that your casing stitch line, that will reinforce this top area so it couldn't just rip open, and then that will help secure it. So I would do that on both sides. And then if you're going through any of the stitches there, then that will help reinforce that you've tucked those stitches in. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about adding our pieces. I'm going to go back over we'll come back to the serger for those of you that were interested in learning more on the serger. We're going to come back to it, so don't worry about that. But I'm going to go back over to the sewing side because I happen to have more space to be able to work, so I can show you what I need to show you. Okay, so, and I showed you all my mess. There we go. Okay. I have a little trash can underneath my sewing area. Do you guys do that too? Have little trash cans everywhere? Okay, so let's talk about the casings. Casings can be made of different things. And I'm going to do on this one, it's called the floor. Great, Sandy. That's great. Me too. I try not to do that it's frowned upon. I'm just saying. But at my house, it's my own house, right? Okay. So here's a couple of things that you could use for the strapping. You could use grosgrain ribbon. That would be awesome. You can use webbing if you want to. One thing that I discovered about this is not really a reinforced or heavy I mean, it's quilting cotton, right? So really beefy fabric. So using webbing might be heavy for the backpack itself, right? So I use something different, but the webbing would work fine too. So this is called, it's labeled as ribbon, but I don't think it's really ribbon. It's like a twill tape with a little bit of a glitter in it. And I don't know where I got it. I kind of think I got it at Hobby Lobby, but I don't know. Don't know. And this one was 5/8 of an inch wide, which is absolutely wonderful. It makes a great casing, but so there you go. I made an error when I went back and bought this. I bought 1/2 inch. And I guess it's not so much of an error, but I think the 5/8 of an inch is just enough bigger that it's a little bit more substantial. Whereas this is stronger than what this is. Okay, now they tell you need 4.5 yards. So I'm going to do the math with you. Are you ready to write this down? Because this is not how I did it. Okay, so let's go to, if you're following along on your instructions on page 7, the last page, it talks about adding the straps. Okay, the straps, they say for the teen size, you need 4.5 yards. Okay, so you can probably see this here. What you need to have is 15 inches hanging outside. So from here to here, you need 15 inches for the child size and 18 inches for the youth size. So what that means is you need 18 for the youth one. Remember, our total size was 16 from left to right. So I'm going with 16. I'm not doing an actual measurement. I'm going 16 plus 18, right? So 16 and 18 times 2, because it's got to come around. It's doubling. That's one side. And that's 68 inches. Then you need to do it for the second side. So you need to take that 68 inches, multiply it 2. So you actually only need 3.7 yards. So if you're working with something that comes on a roll and you're a little tight on the length, the 4.5 yards that it asks you to have is generous. Okay. So that, just know that. All right. So if you were doing the child size, you would need 15 plus, I think it was 12, and do that twice, and then do that twice. And that would give you the actual measurement, the literal measurement that you would need. So I need, what I say, 3.7 yards, and I didn't cut this. So here's my 1, 2, 3, and so that, and 3.7, so that's like, I'm going to do 3/4, and I'm going to cut that. Okay, cut that, fold it in half, so I need 2. I'm trying to do this quickly so you're not terribly bored. All right, so now I have my two straps. So what you're going to do is, first of all, turn this right side out. Okay, inches. So you're going to do 8. I'll show you in a minute. Hold on, Sally. I'll show you the 18 inches and it'll be more clear in just a second. Let's turn this right side out, making sure that our pocket is to the correct side. If I turn this out and I actually had polka dot, polka dot, polka dot, I know that I had my lining, right? Okay, so there is that. And okay, since I put it on backwards, my hole is on the inside for my straps. So that's great. Yeah, I'm gonna have to open up myself a little hole here real quick. Okay, I'll do that in a minute while you're doing yours. Okay, so when you lay your pocket on to get it secured, make sure it's right side up. That will help you in the end. Okay, so I'm gonna take one of my pieces, and you could use the same style bodkin we used a minute ago, or if you have this one, this is pretty cool. It's from Clover. It's a Nancy's Notion. So this little white piece here flips up, and then it has a little jaw that opens up, and you can stick your piece in here. I like to, and even with the other bodkin, when I'm working with trim, I like to turn it over so I have it folded so it doesn't just rip off the end. If you've ever tried to do ribbon and it just pulls off the end, then that's a pain. Okay, so find yourself one end and go in and feed this all the way to the other side and out the other side. Okay. And when you're doing this, try to make sure that you don't twist inside here, that it's going flat. I twisted again. I can't untwist. Well, for Pete's sakes, I'm twisted and I can't get, there we go. Okay. Make sure it's going flat. And then I'm going to pull this out on this side. Okay. There we go. Pull them out this side and then immediately go back in the other casing. So it's making a complete U-turn. And at this point, I do want to make sure that I haven't twisted him. If you've ever made this is dating way back. If you've ever made a slip or anything, you know how irritating it is if you get your elastic twisted. Okay, I don't even think, do they even sell slips anymore? I don't think they do. Okay. All right. So now we can come out the other side. Now, before I pull this, can you see I have a loop over on this side? So if you maintain a loop out here, you can pull the short side and you can start working it through and you can get it even. So you end up with your edges, your ends together. So I'm going to match up right here. Okay. And then I want to pull those so they're all even. And when I got them even, then you can pull them both at the same time and that disappears in there. Okay, so now, Sally, you asked about the 18 inches. The 18 inches is from here, right here, to here. That's the 18 inches. So it's 18 inches, 16 inches, 16 inches, and 18 inches. So if you have the width of the top of your bag from left to right and add 18 inches onto it and double that because you made your U-turn, that will give you the length you need for one side. Okay. And since I have this all good and it's all happy and ready to go, I'm going to meet up my ends right here and I'm going to tie a knot. I know this isn't in the instructions, but I am a chicken. Okay, so I don't want that to pull out of the bag. So I want, if it starts to pull, I want to have it, you know, have some resistance for a knot. Now let's do the other side. So again, I'm going to take the doohickey here, stick him in his little mouth, close that down. Now we're going to go in the opposite side and we'll run it around to the opposite side, keeping it flat. And then let's turn that corner, make a U-turn. Did you see how flexible this turner is? In the instructions, bear in mind that it says that that you need to have, that they suggest you use a tube turner. A tube turner is for making spaghetti straps. I don't know how, I guess you can make that work, but I am definitely a bodkin person. Okay, so I'm going to pull this out of this side And since I know that they're good, I'm going to open him up. And the first thing I'm going to do is just come down here and make a knot. So I have my ends secure. And just make an overhand knot like a balloon, right? And then I'll pull that on the other side. And now we've got our casing. So when you pull it, it closes up. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so go ahead and do that. And I'm going to unstitch my thing because remember I put my pocket right side down. So my hole is actually on the inside, not on the outside. So I'm going to open those up. And while you're threading your casings through, and then we will be able to catch up and we will secure this down. All right. Nobody in this group ever makes a mistake when they're sewing, right? Never, 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 never. Oh, okay. Linda just uses the wire hook from the tube turner. Now that makes sense. That makes sense. But the tube turner, I was struggling with that one. But I bet you that would work. Tube turners are really handy. But in a minute, I'm going to show you something that I do that I've never used. I've never gone back to a tube turner again. It's a different trick and I love it. So, okay. So now while you're finishing up, now I've got holes. I've got my holes. So what you're going to do with your holes is take your bag, okay, find the strap that comes from, for example, I'm working to my left side. So you would find the strap that comes out that side and come down. And let me put my finger in here so you can see it. So on the same side that it's exiting at the top, you're going to come down and stick it inside at the bottom. And I make sure that that knot goes inside my bag, right? And then make sure your ends are nice and flat. And then do the same thing with the other side. So on the same side it exited at the top, you're going to insert it at the bottom. Okay. Actually, I kind of like this natural, tool tape here. This is kind of fun. Okay, so there he is in there. Now, I'm going to turn it wrong side out where it's exiting right here, or it's now coming in. And I'm going to go over that and I'm going to reinforce that a couple of times, go back and forth. So you're going to continue the seam that was being sewn, go all the way down, but make sure you reinforce a little bit where the twill comes, is entering back in. And then of course you can go back over with a zigzag if you want to. I need to actually go back to a straight stitch because I'm only on a zigzag. So I'm going to go ahead and start sewing. And I will just do a back stitch right there. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew and then back stitch. Now some machines have don't have a automatic slowdown on the back stitch. So if that is your machine and it goes fast, just be aware that it's going to go quickly for you. All right, so now I'm going to trim up my little mess right there. I'll take my thread and get rid of that. And I'm going to put it back on my zigzag. And I made my length like a 2 millimeters and I made it 4 millimeters wide. And then I'm just going to go ahead and stitch that edge just to clean that up. Okay. I'm actually not going to want to go back and put this on the serger because I want to leave that knot in there. So it just makes me feel better that there's something else in there that it's going to be holding on to be able to stop it should that for it to pull out. Because, you know, sometimes tapes like this and such, they like to fray and then they'll just come apart because they've frayed. Since I had my machine already on a zigzag, I just went ahead and did the zigzag first, and then I'm going back to the straight stitch. Okay. All right, whoops. And I thought I went back to straight stitch, but I did not. Okay, now I am. So let me do my reverse stitch to anchor that. And I want to back up and stitch over my tape to make sure it doesn't pull out. That's a very good question, Julie. I am going to answer that here in a second. So Julie asked if you couldn't just cut off, turn on, disengage the cutter on your serger. So let me go back over here and show you. These are awesome questions. Okay, so let's go back over to the serger. Okay, so on your serger, if you disengage your knife, yes, you can disengage your knife so your knife stays down and it doesn't come up to cut. But the challenge is that you have all these things working together to weave the thread around the edge of the fabric. So when you do that, we get all tangled up in here. And if you're on a machine other than like the baby lock, you could very well throw it out of time. And that's not a good thing, right? So I would strongly suggest against doing that. Okay. All right, so we're going to do some back and forth bouncing. Are there any other questions while we're here? Actually, I should turn it right side out. Let me go over here to our guy here. And you'll see that now this bag is done. I just push out my corners, and actually you can give your ends a little pull, and that will help push those corners out. But that bag is complete. All right. Oh, and now full disclosure, I should mention, I'll go back to, hold on. Let me go back to this one. And okay, so I'm going to go back to the main one, hopefully, and it didn't do it. Okay. All right. Are we back at the beginning? No, I don't know why. One more try, and then I will try again. So now let me remove that. Okay, so now is it coming back to, there we go. Okay, so on our bag here, in order to get the pocket out of the remaining fabric, my pocket's a little bit shorter than it called for in the pattern. Okay, so my first one here is the full size, and you can see how it's very short. And let me adjust this a little bit. See how there's not much space between the top of the bag and the pocket? That's because I did the size that it said. This one, there's a little bit more space. Of course, I don't have any stuffing in this, but there is more space between the top of the pocket and here. And that's because I was trying to conserve and utilize as much fabric. When we are, when we are going to make use of our fabrics and we want to purge and utilize all that, then we will want to make sure that, you know, you can take a little bit off the pocket. Okay, so now we're going to talk about finishes. We're going to talk about some decorative things. And then, yes, I'm going to tell you about making spaghetti straps. And so we may go a little bit over. So if you need to go, fine, that's cool. I know that your time is important, but know that the recording will have everything. So let's take a look at doing a bound edge. So I've got a couple of things here to show you. Okay, is this the 90 foot? Okay. So we're over on the sewing machine right now. Is that? Nope. Let's go to the sewing machine first, then we're going to go to the serger, and then we're going to come back and forth. So if you're using your sewing machine, the baby lock, and of course, brother does the same thing. There's this really great foot. It's called the bias binder foot. And this foot gives you the ability to put bias binding on without having to hold your tongue just right as much as you do in other cases. So that's that. Now you can use pre-made bias or you can make your own. Okay. Now I made an error. I was deciding between colors and I picked up my bias the right width, 1/2 inch, just like the instructions say, but I got single fold, not by double fold. So let me show you the difference between those two. Now, when you're in the store and you're picking this up, just know that they're right next to each other. So if you go and look at other colors and you go back and grab it, just reread your package. Okay, a single fold has 2 folds. So it really doesn't seem single fold, but it's meant to be applied topically, right? It's going to cover something. Okay, you could fold it and end up with a really teeny tiny fold over bias, but that's not going to encapsulate very much, give you much allowance for anything in there. Now, a bias tape that you purchase that's packaged is actually cut on the bias, so it has stretch to it. So therefore, you can go really nicely around curves, both convex and concave, right? So wrong stuff, right width. Okay, a double fold bias is actually folded 3 times. It will be folded in on each side like this was, but then it's folded in half again. So that way you can slip your quilt or your fabric project in there and it's already folded. Okay, this is actually binding that I had left over from a project, and it is not cut on the bias. So this would not, see how it doesn't want to curve. So it's on straight of grain. So it's not going to want to curve, but we're just doing straight stuff. So it's okay. So this is that bias binding foot. And just about every manufacturer has something similar. So how it does is it's going to attach onto the machine. You just take out your screw that holds your foot on and put this on. Now, how it works is that you've got 2 different screw adjustments. This one here, you adjust to fit whatever trim you're wanting to put on, whatever binding you want to put on. So you're going to open it or close it to make it tighter or looser to accommodate the width. There are 2 little wings. See how it comes and turns under and turns under? If you're using a double bias like this, you want to put 1 in the top and 1 in the bottom, and then adjust your fence the correct direction. I was going the wrong way until it snugs up. And what it does is it basically acts as a third hand to hold your trim in position. But with this type of foot, it does not mean that you're then out of the woods and you can not work. You're still gonna need to make sure everything is positioned correctly and that everything is feeding correctly, which means make sure there's nothing that is retarding this from moving. And so it's moving freely, and that your project also moves freely, and then you can go from there. Now, it also has this screw right here, which can position it left or right, depending on what style of stitch you choose to use. So if you're doing a straight stitch, you obviously can move your needle left or right. Well, and of course, if you have a straight stitch only machine, then this is going to be very important for you to position, because depending on the width of your fabric, that may change. But if you're using a decorative stitch, then you may need to adjust this so you get the zag off and the zig in, or whatever the case may be. All right. And then you're just going to stitch. And as you stitch, this will feed. All right. Now, this is a low shank foot. This is a high shank machine, and my adapter is over there. I didn't even think about that part before we started. best laid plans. But let me get my scrap fabric, and I just want to show you the idea of how this works. So you're going to take your fabric and your project, and you're going to lay it in here in between that layer. So you have it front and back. And then what I usually do is have a tail back here. So you're going to need a little bit extra length. Get this position, put your needle down in the fabric, and I like to run my stitch so it's just like a 1/16 of an inch in from the fold. But if you put your needle down to hold it in place and have your foot down and the needle down, then you can come and let that hold it for you before you start sewing, and you get everything else put into position. So when you start to sew, it's ready to go. Okay, so you would have it all in here like this, and then you would sew. And as you sew, the foot, that guide on the foot is going to help make sure that your stitches stay in a relatively stable place. Now it is attached to the foot. A foot does have play, so it may not be necessarily absolutely perfect, but it's pretty good, right? So stitch that down. Now, if you're going to use that style for the outside of the bag, you're going to do the same thing where we started here. Make sure that you don't have any raw edges, and I'm going to show you how to start it in a second. And then you come down and leave yourself a tail, because instead of inserting it in like this, they have you tie them together at the end. So the tail of this right here, you would take your strap and tie a knot so they're all joined together down here. And if you do that, I would just put a lot of reinforcement stitches on there, because that's a lot of pressure. Okay, now let's say this is how you want to start, and this is the top. On the top of our bag, we need to have a nice, beautiful finished start to it, right? It can't be raw edge. So what you can do is take your glue stick, open it up, and use your glue stick just on the inside. See how it's yellow? But it's going to dry clear. And I would just finger press that and put it back the way it is. And you can do this on your ironing board, so that way you get all your creases back how it should be. I need to put the lid on that so that doesn't dry. And then use that at the beginning and start it with that nice folded edge. Okay. And then stitch down. And it's okay if that's hard to manipulate. Let me get a pin in there. If that's hard for you to get the binder foot up there, start down a little bit. It's okay to start down and then stitch from as far, from wherever you can, and then go back and just straight stitch and backpack right at the top. So that's okay. All right. Does the Dream Machine come with an adapter for the, yes, I do believe it does. And if you are looking for the adapter, it's a little stubby little piece of metal that is the adapter. So that should work. Okay, now another thing that you can do with the adjustable foot is a fold over elastic. So if you're ever wanting to put this on on the neck edge of a top or something like that, you can feed this in as well and have that go so it can help hold that in place for you. Right? Okay. All right. And let's go to, we're going to go off of the sewing machine and we're going to go over to our serger, and let's talk about our bias binding there. Okay. All right. So now when you're working with a bias bound edge or something like that, here's my fabric and I pinned it. Okay. So we're going to use this little contraption here. So when we're doing that, it's using the chain side, not the overlock. So we need to switch our machine over. So I am going to turn down that knife and get that locked down into place. And I need to come down. So I no longer need my upper looper. And I'm just going to find my scissors and I'm going to go ahead and cut my loopers and let's pull them out. Okay, so now I put my chain looper in because I do need him and I don't need one of my needles. And I'm going to have to get into my bag because I don't have my screws. So the 3 needles on the left on this machine are all, they're all cover hem related. Overlock. Can't even talk. They're overlock related. So I'm going to get rid of that thread and I should only have my needle thread that's on my chain looper and my needle thread my chain looper thread. So now I'm going to take my thread here and come over. Now you've probably noticed with the Triumph and the Ovation and those other sergers from Baby Lock that they have 8, and those are really placeholders for your machine to know where to pull the thread from. So you don't be dismayed by all those needle locations. It's okay. And I am going to show you a couple of different things on this machine when it comes to doing some attachments. Okay, so let me put my needle down. It's making my hand difficult to maintain. Right, you go and up and over and there we go. So now I just need to put my needle in and we're good to go. So trim my thread. The needles on these machines actually have little windows at the top of them so you can see if they're inserted all the way up, which is pretty neat. Okay, so now I'm going to thread that needle, and when we thread the machine, there's actually a little lever right over here that says threading, and I'm going to rotate that till those tunnels right here are going to click into place, and I'm going to thread that needle, bring down the needle threader, find the end. Okay, now that needle's threaded. No, it's not. There it is. There we go. So now my needle's threaded. So I'm ready to go. Okay, now I need to flip my switch that said threading, take that back. And I need to get my screws because I forgot to get them out of my bag of joy. And actually, I think I got them out of my bag of joy and did something with them. And I don't know if oh, there they are. Thank goodness. I don't know if I can find them. So your machine, whether you have this accessory foot or not, your machine came with these 2 screws and they are pretty handy. Don't lose them. So I do need to take this little, this window off, this door, and put on our flat tabletop. And the flat tabletop you see has screw holes in it that are reinforced. So they actually have, they actually do have the threading on them. And my serger table is very tight. So there we go. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is pop this guy on. And what he does is he's going to take the fabric. It's going to fold the fabric for me. So take him, get him into position. And I'm using those 2 needles. So I want to have this horn angled in between those 2 notches on the foot. If you notice on your serger, you have little nubbins on the front of your foot, and those are in alignment with your needles. So I'm going to move them over a little bit. Okay, so now I have my guy here. Oh, and in a minute, we're going to talk about doing pearls, putting pearls on with the foot of the machine and doing those types of things. Okay, so now this gets fed in and I have an angle cut on the front of my fabric. Raise my presser foot. Excuse me. And let's get him worked in. And I do like to get him to the back of the foot. So pull a little bit. Your tweezers come in very handy here. And I have those in some place other than here. Okay, and what this is going to do is take your flat piece of fabric and actually fold it over as you sew, which is really, really a delight. Okay, so I've got a nice tail going there, and it is, let's go angle down here. See how he is flat going in, but he's being turned, he goes. So then you can take your edge of your bag and just slip it in there and then start sewing. And then it will stitch on your fabric right there. Okay. So that's pretty cool. Then when you get to the end, just keep going until you run to the end of the fabric. So if you're clever, you could probably make that work where you end up with straps the whole way. Okay, so you see how that works. That's pretty cool. But let's look at a different attachment, just since we're talking about making, we mentioned making spaghetti straps a minute ago. Okay, so that, oh, okay. In the email after our event, I'm going to put my email in there. So if you have any questions, you can always feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay, and I hope, okay, I did not break that. Okay, so let's talk about a different attachment, just since we have this right here. And it's another good way to maximize your machine. And this is how I like to make spaghetti straps or drawstring ties for like pajamas or anything like that. So this one, you're going to take your fabric, and again, it's a flat piece of fabric, and it's easier to get it to go in if you cut an angle at the top and slip that in. Okay, and a lot of times I'll use a pin to get him going. You can also start this off of the fabric, so and then apply it, attach it to the machine after you get this started if you want to. Okay, so now he's ready to go. This happens to be a wider one, and then you can also adjust how close. If you find it's too close to your feet, to your foot, you can adjust that. So then you get this really great spaghetti strap, and then the raw edges are encapsulated underneath the stitching of the machine. And you can do different widths. They have ones that are smaller, wider, and one even wider yet than this. So that's just a real fun thing to do too. So now let's talk about adding decorative trim onto your pocket top. All right, and hopefully it won't be, I won't keep you too long over. So let's go back to the machine side and move these things. So one of the things that they suggest that you use is pearls or piping, or also rickrack. And you can also use twipping. So on your, let's move all this over, I think. Okay, so on your machine, with just a regular foot, you can do some fun things. So I did also mention to you, and I forgot to show them to you, but on the suggested supply list, I had mentioned the sew tights. And I don't know if you've seen these, but these are really cool. They are magnetic. There's some adhesive on this paper here, so you get him off. He's stuck by the adhesive on the back side. All right, they come in different sizes, but what makes them really handy is if you're working with something that you can't pin, like if you're working with vinyls or anything like that, or you have a lot of fabric and it's thick and heavy, the magnets actually hold them together. So those are really, really handy. So you might enjoy those. Okay, so let's look at what I did here on this one. This twill tape or ribbon was nice and soft, and so it made a really cute edge on there. So what I did with that is I folded it in half, but the first thing I did is I ran a stitch of fabric. I put them the top of the fabric wrong sides together, and then I stitched using press and bond thread. So I put press and bond thread in the bobbin and in the needle. So here's the press and bond thread, and this is a fusible thread. Okay, so I put those two, and I'm just going to put my regular thread back in so I can show you the next thing. But I ran a little 1/4 inch seam along the top edge there. And then what I did is using a pressing sheet, I had my pressing sheet down on my pressing surface, and I pressed this halfway. See, I just came in the halfway, and you press with a low temperature, some pressure, and about 5 to 9 seconds, and then you move, and then it's fused. Then I took it off of the pressing sheet, folded it over on the back side, and then I pressed that. Okay, and press it the same way, low temperature, like a silk setting, and you hold it for a little bit, and then it's perfectly held in place. And then I went back and of course did a top stitch, because getting a lot of in and out and wear on here, you don't want to just leave it with the fused side, because you never know how much wear it's going to get. So it just might not hold together. Now I always keep a bob filled with my press and bond, and I keep it right in my accessory tray. And I have written with a Sharpie, it says press bond. So I know this is my fusible thread. Okay, this will go through the eye of a needle, and it's handy having it on just the bobbin too, because if you're doing a tote bag or a pillow that you leave the bottom open a little bit, run this so it is face on the top side of your fabric, right inside that seam allowance. So that way, when you turn it right side out, you can give it a quick press. It will hold that opening shut. So then you can go back and stitch it permanently. So, but because I don't know about you, but it's kind of a pain to get things quickly held. It's hard to hold them in place and have them not come apart when you're trying to sew it. I don't know about you. That's how it works for me. Okay, let's talk about rickrack, and then we're going to talk about piping. So rickrack, lots of fun. The trick with rickrack is that when you're stitching it, your final project, you want to have about half of it popping out the top, the other half in the seam allowance. So your seam allowance is going to kind of be dictated by the width of your fabric, right? Or I mean, sorry, by the width of your rickrack. So here, my total width of my rickrack is a 1/2 inch. So I really can't use anything more than a 1/4 inch seam on this. If I do, then I'm not going to have very much poking out of my rickrack, which might be what you want, and that's perfectly fine. But I'm going to put that down. Now, another thing that I'm going to do, if I can find, if my head were stuck to my head, okay, oh, there it is. just so it stays in place, I'm going to come and just put a couple of pieces of my glue stick here. If you've ever done a project and you've pinned a trim, whether it be a ribbon or you've pinned anything, pin short, right? And when you put it in, it shifts it. So let's go ahead, and I just did my little bit of a glue stick there. Now, I'm going to use, you can use the 1/4 inch marking right here on your machine. You can do that. But did you know that a lot of machines have a 1/4 inch stitch? So if I were to use a 1/4 inch stitch length or stitch, and I'll tell you where that is in a second. Okay, so if you're on a Baby Lock or a Brother machine, across your top menu on your screen, there is a menu of stitches that says Q. And if you go to Q2 and you're using the J foot, it's a 1/4 inch from your 1/4 inch from your seam. Okay, so now I did get off a little bit. It's a little bit wider there, but you can see how cute that top is just by adding that rickrack. Isn't that fun? And of course, since the casing's going to go there, I would do a little straight stitch right there to keep that from rolling in on it. And I would use, you could use a hot, in this case, a hot pink thread to match the rickrack. You could do a decorative stitch, or you could use the same color thread so it blends in. You know, your choice. What a fun thing to add decorative stitches. That would be lots of fun. Okay, let's talk about piping. Piping feet. Okay, the piping foot, this is, well, that's for the serger. There's a piping foot for your machine too. And what I do, oh, it's the pearl and piping foot. Okay, so I have him and I have his instructions right here. This is what the pearls and piping foot package looks like. And if you have a brother and you can only find Baby Lock feet, the Baby Lock feet fit. Baby Lock and brother wear the same size shoes, so it's all good. Okay, now in the Baby Lock packaging, which is really awesome, they give you an instruction sheet. So it tells you how to do things. So this is pearls and piping. We're going to do piping first, which is here, and then we're going to talk about the beads in a minute. So I'm going to pop my foot off and I'm going to put on my pearl foot. Oh, I should show you this. Feet. Feet sometimes are hard to tell from the front side what their function is. All the business is on the back side of a foot. So this is a pearls and piping foot. It looks very similar to other brands' pearl feet. Pfaff, Viking, and they all look about the same. And see, it has a tunnel that will ride with the piping in there. You can use this to make your own piping. And of course you can use a zipper foot to sew in piping as well. This is packaged piping. Well, obviously, because it's in a package, right? But how this works is, of course, it has the piping right inserted into the bias. I packaged piping, it is biased, so it will go around curves. If I'm making piping, it's probably going to be on a straight of grain, so I know I'm not putting it on a curve. Okay, you know, but keep that in mind when you're making piping. If you're going to want to, have that used for something else. And I'm going to go ahead and put a glue stick in there too, just so he doesn't wiggle on me. I love this stuff. Okay. So put him down so he's held into place, nice and great, a long seam allowance there. So my goal is I'm going to have that little, the bump of the piping that's in here goes underneath inside that well. So we want our stitches to be over here on the right-hand side. So I am going to use my left-right shift to move that needle, and I moved it the wrong way. So I need to go up, goes to the right. So I'm going to move it over until it's going to clear the piping, but not hit the foot. Okay, it's a fine line there. All right, so now you put your other fabric right there with it. And again, you're working with odd shapes and you're working with multiple layers. It's okay if you want to use some of the glue here as well, so you don't get the shift. All right. All right, so that's held in place now. And this one, you really don't need to go back and do anything except for press it. Isn't that nice? It looks so good. Now, do you know the difference between piping and welting? Piping is the same, is thin like this. It's something you'd see on a garment or a gentleman's pajamas, I always say. Welting is the stuff you see for home deck that's much bigger. And that you would use either a welting foot, which I don't think Baby Locker Brother has, but like Foff and Viking do. And that is much chubbier. Okay, but isn't that pretty? And this is beautiful to add in on your bias binding. If you're going to use for your quilts, right? So if this was my bias binding, that's going to, boy, can I even find an example? Okay, let's say this is my quilt. Here's my beautiful, beautiful quilt, right? And I'm going to bind this. Look at how stunning that is to add a little edge like that. It's just lovely, just really, really lovely. Okay, so let's talk about pearls. Now, pearls, I need to put my regular foot back on, don't I? No, I don't. I need this foot. What am I saying? Who am I talking to? This is, I need to leave that foot on. I'm going to make a seam real quick. But the pearls foot, I'm putting on pearls is really fun, but you need your seam stitched first. Okay. Because you don't insert, unless the pearls are on a tape like piping is, you're not going to apply it in a seam, you apply it to the seam. Okay. And you can find pearls that are on a strand in usually the home deck area. Okay, so in the instructions for our project, it asks for 3mm pearls. Could I find 3mm pearls? No, these are 2mm pearls, but it will work fine. And then remember, you have your instructions here, which is really handy. So for this, you're going to use a zigzag stitch at 2mm or longer with a width of 3 to 7mm to achieve the needle position. What on earth does that mean? Okay, and then this foot can hold beads that are up to 4mm in width, or cording that's up to a 1/4 inch in chubbiness. And what is 4mm? That's 2 standard stitch lengths, right? Because your machine usually is at a 2. All right. So let's talk about our zigzag. I'm going to go to a zigzag, but let's talk about what we need our foot to do. So when it talked about length, and it said that the stitch length should be between 2mm and longer, it's because when you zig and zag, our goal is to straddle this bead. You can see, we want to go in this side and come out over here. So that would be 2mm. Okay, in this case, because this is a 2mm bead. I found beads in this fancy packaging. It was just at the craft store. And it's actually to 2.5. Yes, ma'am. Someone's talking. Charlene. Sorry, my glasses don't look that well. Did you have something that you wanted to say? Okay, I'm going to mute you then. Okay. All right, so my beads are actually 2.5mm, so that's a good guide. I'm going to change the length of my zigzag to 2.5mm from zig to zag. Now, it also says on there that you should have your stitch width at 3 to 7mm, and that's to clear your beads, because you definitely don't want to impact your beads. And when you sew, your beads are going to go a little bit left, a little bit right. See how they flex a little bit? When these beads are smaller, then the max size of the beads, so I know that I'm going to get a little bit of play. So mine's width is set at 3.5. This is a small bead. I'm going to go down to 3. And actually, I think what I'm going to do, just to make sure everything's going good, I'm going to start sewing on a cloth before I get to my beads. And I'm slowing myself down. I want to give myself some purchase on my fabric. Now, I'm going to slip my beads inside that tunnel and put my foot down. And can you see how the tunnel is nestling the beads? So I'm just meeting the edge of my fabric kind of to the middle of that tunnel. And then we should, if we hold our tongue right, we should do well. So I'm keeping my fabric, or trying to keep my fabric in the middle of that foot. So it's important that you choose a zigzag that is centered, that isn't, you know, all on the left and then on the right, but that one that is centered in the middle. Okay, because you know how some zigzags will favor like the edge of the foot. And then look at how nice that looks. They're just stitched on, and that's with blue thread. So imagine if you're using the same color thread as the fabric. Sorry, it's blurry, huh? Same color thread as the fabric, or if you're using ivory or a monofilament that's clear, that's just absolutely beautiful. And there's lots of fun beads out there. You don't have to get pearl. There's silver, gold, there's colored beads. You can even string your own beads if you want to. So that's lots of fun. Okay. All right. So are there any questions on anything that we've gone over, or if there's a question on something we haven't gone over? All right, let's go back. We'll just wrap it up. So I hope that you've had fun, and I hope that you've enjoyed working together. Again, the video will be added to, when it gets rendered and it's ready to be shared, then we will send out an email with that link. And in that email, you'll also have the shopping link if there's any of these accessories that you wanted. It will also have, again, the instructions attached to it. And then also I'll leave my email should you have any questions about it. You know, feel free to give me a call, not a call, an email. And that can be at any time of day. That's absolutely wonderful. And everything, all the notions that I showed you are available at Quality Sewing. And then also the web page, we have created a special web page just for this event. And that link was in your email on Monday and on Saturday. But if you didn't get it, that's why we're sending it again. And then that will be there. And then, of course, I will have my email in there, and that's Riva. But the emails come from Lynette, and she is our back of the scenes person who organizes the registrations, and she forwards those emails for me. So you will see that probably come from her, not from me, because she's the one who does that. Okay, so I have no guarantee on the time that it will take this video to render. It sometimes can take a day, but sometimes I've had one take as much as 36 hours. But make sure to check out any of those products on our website. And again, if you have any questions, please let us know. I saw some of you might have to look at a new serger. Hey, we're there for you. You know, we'll show you whatever you want. But thank you so so-much for joining in today and helping make a difference. Hey, Ruth, good job. She finished her bag. Yay. You'll have to hold it up, Ruth. I want to see. Let me see if I can find you, Ruth. Oh, there. Oh, Carol, you've finished yours too? Wow, look at Carolyn did, and Carol did, and iPad did. I don't know who iPad is. Deborah, Eileen, oh, good job. Ruth, I see only the top. Hold it up a little bit higher. Oh, that's great. Look at that fun fabric. Oh, and Karen, this is great. You guys did such a nice job. You know, we haven't done too many sew-alongs, so it's hard. Oh, look at Arlette. That's beautiful. It's hard to know how many people. Oh, you even have a grin on your face, so you're still happy. So that's even better. Oh, very good. So you never know how a sew along will go. That's kind of hard to sew at a pace. Look at that one. I love those, that treat fabric. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So good job. So thank you for joining. I hope we can all make a difference. And we'll be taking the video will be up, and we'll be taking donations through the end of May. So just till the end of the month. And then, yeah, as much. And if you have stash that you need to get rid of, remember, assembly line sewing is the way to go. Get everything cut all at once. Then mark your tops all at once. And then also, when you're doing a step, if you do that same step on every bag, it takes not much more time to do 2 as it does to do 1 of any project if you're assembly lining it. So just do that. See you, Rebecca. So thank you. Oh, Deborah, that's lovely. Good job. Yeah. So, okay. See you next time. And again, the video and everything will be up till the end of May, and we'll send you all the information email within the next couple of days. So have a great day. It's sunny and you can enjoy the rest of the sunshine. So see you later. Thanks for joining us.